Coming up on Bridge City News, a violent sex predator is arrested in Lethbridge. Plus, the border remains closed another 30 days for all non-essential travel. And the deadly crash of a snowbird's aerobatic plane in BC on the weekend raises serious questions about safety.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Hello and thank you for joining us. The province today announced new funding of $14 million per month to protect people in continuing care, including those in long-term care to designated supported living and seniors lodges. These residents are at highest risk of COVID-19, and according to Health Minister Tyler Shandro, facility operators have raised concerns with the cost of complying with public health orders put in place.
So today I'm announcing funding of more than $14 million per month, or $170 million per year to these operators. This funding, and this is important, will be retroactive to March 15th of this year. It will cover enhanced staffing as well as costs for cleaning supplies and loss of accommodation revenue due to vacant beds and rent freezes. And it's going to be maintained throughout all stages of Alberta's relaunch until the public health orders are lifted and the threat of COVID-19 is passed.
This funding is on top of other previously announced financing to healthcare aides for a wage increase of $2 per hour. There are currently 1,004 cases of COVID-19 active in the province. 39 new cases were reported early this week. Alberta's COVID-19 hospitalization rates remain low, with 61 people currently in the hospital and 8 in intensive care. In total, 5,854 Albertans have recovered, and one more Albertan has died, bringing that number to 128. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says Calgary and the city of Brooks will get more advance notice this time around on opening up their economies. Kenney says the decision will be made and announced Friday on whether those two communities will be allowed to reopen restaurants and hair salons on Monday. Kenney's government was criticized when restaurant and hair shop owners in those cities got only 18 hours notice that they would be not allowed to reopen last Thursday. A violent serial rapist accused of watching a 12-year-old girl through her bedroom window 3 times in the past month has been arrested in Lethbridge. 34-year-old Keegan Spearchief was wanted on voyeurism warrants in connection to those incidents in Calgary. He was arrested on the weekend by Lethbridge Police Service. Spearchief has a long history of violent sexual acts against women and girls and has been monitored in the past by the Calgary Police Service's high-risk offender program. In 2003, a then 17-year-old Spearchief was sentenced as an adult for rape. The investigation into an altercation involving a group of people Friday night in Galt Gardens remains ongoing, and Lethbridge police continue to ask anyone with information to come forward. A significant challenge in the investigation has been a lack of willingness from some of the involved parties to speak to police and provide statements.
As both parties had scattered throughout the park and down to various streets, and police immediately stopped and canvassed the area in order to identify those that may have been involved. The officers did stop and speak with several groups of people within the Galt Gardens and along the streets adjacent to Galt Gardens in order to identify any of those people that may have witnessed or been participants in the physical altercation that was reported. Unfortunately, those people that were spoken to were reluctant to provide information to the officers at the time, stating that they were not willing to take part in the investigation and provide statements, or they had seen nothing and didn't want to be interviewed by police.
A country music superstar will be leading the province's newly appointed human trafficking task force. Musician and anti-human trafficking advocate Paul Brandt will lead the 7-member task force that will provide guidance and recommendations on how to best implement the government's 9-point action plan to combat human trafficking. The task force will find ways to prevent human trafficking and protect and empower survivors in our province. The closure of the border between Canada and the U.S. to all but essential travel has been extended for another 30 days. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the two countries have agreed to maintain current conditions at least into June. Canada and the U.S. agreed back in March to halt all non-essential travel to prevent the import of COVID-19 cases and have already extended the agreement once.
Canada and the United States have once again agreed to extend by 30 days the current measures in place along the border. This is an important decision that will keep people in both of our countries safe.
Trudeau says the border with the U.S. is a source of vulnerability when it comes to risk of importing cases of COVID-19. The U.S. has more than 1.5 million active cases of the virus, or 42% of the world's active caseload. The federal government has been scrutinized by farmers for not providing enough financial support for the ag industry amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Recently, the government allocated $252 million to the agriculture sector. The Southern Alberta Council of Public Affairs heard from one expert about the importance of maintaining our food supply.
Probably for the very first time during a crisis that I've seen a Canadian government recognizing that processing needs help. Without processing, you don't really have much of a value chain. You don't have much of a food industry. And that's why right now, because our food processing sector is somewhat anemic, farmers are paying for that.
One group that's invested big time into the ag industry is Farm Credit Canada. The agricultural financing group has invested $100 million into Agriculture and Food and Business Solutions Fund. Vice President and Treasurer Rebecca Clark explains FCC's reasoning behind the donation.
Really, this fund is about helping companies that, had an unsuspected business disruption of some support, of some type, to provide them the financing to support them through that challenge that they may be experiencing. Food has never been more important in terms of the growing economy and the growing population of the world. And as you've seen in this kind of COVID-19 situation, it becomes a key staple of everyone's household.
Applications for the Business Solutions Fund will be assessed individually and granted a maximum of $10 million. The economy has been slowing down since the province and city have declared states of public health emergency, but realtors are still doing their best to provide service to their customers. Real estate offices may have closed their doors to the public, but thanks to new technology, it doesn't mean their business has to be suspended.
We always encourage people to look at the photos online first, and we're seeing a lot more realtors post virtual tours right now. So that way it's easier for people to rule out houses that they don't want, for sure. And then when they do want to see a house, we will ask them to declare that they are healthy, that they're not experiencing any symptoms of COVID-19, and then we take precautions inside the house as well. Now the sellers will leave all the lights on, and it's actually a little bit easier because when we leave the house, we don't have to shut off the lights because we're trying to minimize touching as much as possible.
The federal government has announced that people who have been temporarily laid off may be eligible to receive $2,000 a month until this summer. Tax season can be difficult to navigate even without a global pandemic. The federal government extended its deadline to June 1st, but companies like H&R Block are challenged by working through important details over the phone.
There are certain parts that are taking longer to do our same service that we did. Traditionally we'd have clients come into us, sit down, we would conduct an interview with them, look at their slips, we'd check our sources to be able to see that we have everything that we need for that return, and then finish it off, do explanation as we're going. Obviously, things are different with COVID-19 being around. So when you're looking at this 2019 tax return, ask them questions about next year. Let us help you better prepare yourself for a bigger refund come 2020.
There are 8 H&R Block locations in Lethbridge where you can drop off your tax forms if you haven't already done so. Thanks to a fabric donation received 11 years ago and the U of L Department of Drama, nurses at Good Samaritan Park Meadows Village Supportive Living Facility are receiving new scrubs and scrub bags in a time of need.
11 years ago, as I'm overwhelmed loading all of this fabric into 3 different vehicles, I'm thinking, when are we ever going to use it? And theater people are hoarders because you never know. So lo and behold, unfortunately, we got hit with COVID-19. And James McDowell, my supervisor, said to me, you know, there's this film company in Calgary that is making scrubs. What do you think? And I said, oh, if you'll let me do this, I would love to do this. Good Samaritans was the first place I contacted, and Leslie, the woman who I spoke to, was so positive and so supportive and so on board.
The fabric used to make the scrubs was donated to the university from a fabric store that had closed down in Vulcan. If you're a Canadian, chances are you've heard the name Terry Fox. He's a Canadian icon who had cancer and had his leg amputated, only to decide to run across the country to raise money and awareness for cancer. 40 years ago, he embarked on his courageous Marathon of Hope run. As Micah Quinn explains, the Lethbridge Terry Fox Run has been running since 1980, and this year, you'll find the event to be a lot different.
This year marks the 40th anniversary Terry Fox ran across Canada to raise awareness for and to fund research to try to find a cure for cancer. Lethbridge has put on the annual Terry Fox Run every year since 1980, but this year, due to COVID-19, the event is going virtual.
On Run Day, which is September 20th of this year, we will be doing online check-ins through that event. So you can check in through the event, you can post videos of yourself doing some sort of physical activity.
Johansson says that by going online, it might be easier to get participation.
We generally average 100 to 150 live participants on Run Day. We're hoping that we can hit that benchmark, if not double it, because online is sometimes easier for people to participate, particularly if they have some sort of physical limitations.
Adidas is partnering up with the Terry Fox Foundation to make a limited edition shoe, with all proceeds going to the foundation.
When you order it, inside the shoe comes with the 40th anniversary Terry Fox logo. And the tissue paper wrapping that comes around the shoes is actually a replica of the letter that Terry wrote to Adidas asking them to sponsor his shoes for his initial run.
If you want to fundraise or make a donation, you can go to the Lethbridge Terry Fox Run website. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Alberta's energy minister says our province is confident the Keystone XL pipeline remains a critical part of North America's post-pandemic economic recovery. Sonia Savage's comments come after Joe Biden's campaign announced the former vice president will rip up President Donald Trump's approvals for the pipeline if he takes over the White House next year. Premier Jason Kenney has committed $1.5 billion to the expansion, along with a $6 billion loan guarantee, but court challenges in Montana continue to delay the project. Savage says the government will work with TC Energy and Ottawa to defend the value of its investment in the project, which she says is a vital part of Canada-U.S. relations. One person is in custody following an attack at a home in Edmonton that left a child dead. Police say officers were called just before 9 p.m. yesterday about a stabbing at a home in the southeastern part of the city. They say a young girl was found with life-threatening injuries and died at the scene. The Canadian Armed Forces says a recovery operation for a downed Cyclone helicopter off the coast of Greece will ramp up next week with the help of the U.S. Navy. Senior military commanders detailed the plan today, noting the Canadian military does not have the capacity to recover the helicopter from under about 3,000 meters of water. 6 service members died when the helicopter went down on April 29th, but only 2 bodies have been recovered. The Cyclone's flight data recorder and voice recorders are now being analyzed by the National Research Council, but experts have said examining the main wreckage could provide important clues about what caused the crash. And the deadly crash of a snowbird's aerobatic plane in BC on the long weekend raises legitimate questions about safety. According to the Prime Minister, he says the government will wait for the results of an investigation before reaching any conclusions.
My thoughts and the thoughts of all Canadians are with the families of Captain Casey, Captain McDougall, and the entire Snowbirds team. This has been a very difficult few weeks for members of the Canadian Armed Forces. As we mourn, we remember Captain Casey as a proud Nova Scotian and an outstanding servicewoman, a journalist who turned her talents to the forces. She will be remembered not just for her professionalism, but for her sense of humor and for her kindness. As we honor her, we pay tribute to the bravery of all those who serve today. I think there are very good questions being asked by a whole lot of people about safety right now, first and foremost by the RCAF, and there is going to be a proper investigation, and we're going to allow them to do their work before we make assumptions about what might be the outcome of that investigation.
The commander of the Snowbirds says the cross-country tour, known as Operation Inspiration, has been suspended following that fatal crash. Lieutenant Colonel Michael French says that the team's Tudor jets are subject to an operational pause. The Snowbirds had been in the midst of a cross-country tour aimed at boosting morale during the COVID-19 pandemic. Captain Jennifer Casey, a public affairs officer from Halifax, was killed in the crash, while the pilot, Captain Richard McDougall, sustained serious but non-life-threatening injuries. And our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone involved in that crash. Looking ahead to our weather, it looks like we've traded in that nice sunshine for some rain showers. We'll have complete weather details coming up for you right after the break. And welcome back. Here's a look at our weather for this Tuesday. This evening, we could see a possibility of some rain, actually up to 5 to 10 millimeters overnight, with an overnight low of 9 degrees. We could see a bit of northwest winds as well, gusting to 40 kilometers per hour at times. And tomorrow, we could also see a chance of rain up to 5 millimeters. Then 15 degrees is the high for tomorrow, and an overnight low of 9 degrees. We could see a chance of rain over tomorrow evening as well. So we traded our sunshine in for some rain. We're going to see rain again on Thursday, high of 11 degrees. Increasing clouds for Friday with a high of 12. And then on the weekend, we could see that sun pop out again with the partly cloudy skies for both Saturday and Sunday, with a high of 15 Saturday and 20 degrees for Sunday. A high of 21 is expected next Monday with a mix of sun and cloud as well. There you go. So let's see what the almanac says for the average highs this time of year. 19 degrees. We're definitely up there. The overnight lows for this time of year, 5 degrees. The high temperature on this day was back in 1964. It was 30 degrees. And the coldest temperature was -6. That was in 2003. The sun rose this morning at 5:41 a.m. Sunset is scheduled for 9:15 p.m. Look at that. That is a lot of sunlight compared to what we were having just a couple of months ago. It's about 15 and a half hours or so. So let's take a look at the highs across the nation for tomorrow. Victoria and Vancouver could also see a chance of rain, 60% chance to be exact. 16 is the high for both of those cities, 19 the high for Edmonton under partly cloudy skies. There is a chance of showers beginning in the morning tomorrow in Calgary as well, with a high of 16 degrees. Now the rest of the area here in Saskatchewan, Saskatoon could see a chance of thunderstorms tomorrow, high of 23 degrees. Mix of sun and cloud expected in Regina. Look at that temperature there, 27 degrees is their expected high tomorrow, and 29 over in Winnipeg under sunny skies. Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal are finally seeing the sun shine again after rains last week. 17 degrees, the high in Toronto, 25 in Ottawa, and 23 in Montreal. Should be a lovely day tomorrow out there. And also, look what's happening on the East Coast. Fredericton, 21, Halifax, 17, and Charlottetown, 15 degrees under sunny skies. Frost advisory overnight, though, for those 3 cities. St. John's, Newfoundland will see a mix of sun and cloud tomorrow with a high of 5 degrees. There you go. That is your forecast.
Today's weather highlights are brought to you by Dan's LA Carpet Cleaning. Residential and commercial carpet and furniture cleaning since 1989.
The Montreal-based clothing retailer Reitmans is seeking court protection from its creditors under the company's Creditors Arrangement Act to allow it to implement a restructuring plan to address the impacts of COVID-19. The company has closed its stores during the pandemic, but its e-commerce websites have remained open. Reitman says it's securing interim financing to allow its stores to continue normal operations following the opening of its retail locations and throughout the CCAA process. Approximately 6,800 people are employed through its 576 stores, including Reitman's, Pennington's, RW & Co., Additional, and Time Maternity. Walmart says its profits and sales surged during the fiscal first quarter, topping almost all expectations. It says earnings hit $3.99 billion US, or $1.40 per share, with adjusted earnings of $1.18 per share, exceeding Wall Street expectations of $1.10. Online sales jumped 74%, while same-store sales were up 10% in the U.S. on strong sales of food, health and wellness goods, and the COVID-19 pandemic spread. As the COVID-19 pandemic spread, rather. Costs also soared as the company spent $900 million US in additional compensation for its workers. The pandemic could mean the end of London's famed Globe Theatre. Britain's theaters have been closed since March to prevent the spread of the virus, but some venues have received government subsidy. But 95% of the Globe's revenues come from its ticket sales, and the theater says the blow from COVID-19 has been financially devastating and possibly terminal. The government's cultural committee says the Globe is part of Britain's national identity, and losing a national treasure to the pandemic would be a tragedy. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 246 points to 14,885. The Dow was down 390 points to 24,206. The S&P 500 was down 30 points to 2,922. The Nasdaq was down 49 points to 9,185. Oil was up 68 cents to $32.50 per barrel. Natural gas was up 2 cents to $1.80. Gold was up 22 cents to $1,745.27. And silver was unchanged at $17.35 an ounce. Wheat is at $2,348 per metric ton. Barley is up $236 per metric ton. Canola is at $473 per metric ton. Corn is at $229 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 5 cents to $99.25. Feeder cattle were up 83 cents to $127.50. Lean hogs were down $1 to $58.65. And the Canadian dollar was unchanged for the day at 72 cents US.
Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada is contemplating how it will safely end restrictions on international travel. Trudeau confirmed today that the U.S. has agreed to a 30-day extension on the mutual ban of non-essential border crossings. He says the government is already considering what will happen after that ban expires on June 21st. This pandemic is also having a serious impact on those living on the streets of Lethbridge, where the needs of food and clothing are still present. Ken Kissick from Streets Alive Mission explains that they are still accepting donations at a downtown warehouse. That interview is coming up right after this short break. Stay with us. The coronavirus pandemic has had a major impact on all of us, but one segment of the society has likely been impacted more than most, and that is, of course, the homeless population and the working poor. Our guest today is Ken Kissick, co-founder of Streets Alive Mission here in Lethbridge. Ken, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so Ken, I would imagine that this has to be an extra tough time for people on the streets. I'm guessing many have pre-existing medical conditions and limited access to medical care and whatnot.
It's kind of a two-edged sword, because yes, they're a more vulnerable population. But the other side to that is, for them, coronavirus is not something that they're worried about, because Hep C, HIV, liver, kidney, there's a lot of other things that will affect them more greatly than the possibility of coronavirus.
That makes sense.
But it does limit the services now that they can access. So there's a myriad of things that make it difficult for us to manage some of the population, the addicted population, that wants to stop, trying to get them on supports, trying to get them to treatment or detox centers, all of that is really difficult.
I would imagine, and now, of course, we're all doing the social distancing thing, right? How is this population handling that? Are they doing it, or are they not so much?
Well, the street population is a family unto itself. They have one another's backs. And so to try and get them to self-distance is a really keen problem, because while they understand what's trying to go on, they just feel like family. Now, we're not self-distancing as families because we're in a group, right? And so are they. And so we try and get them to, do that stuff. When they come into Streets Alive, we've set up so that, while they're waiting, they're 6 feet apart. They have to come in. There's a hand washing station. And they're pretty good at following those instructions. But then they'll go back outside and all stand together, a group on the street. So.
Yeah, exactly. But the education component is there. You're teaching them, and
yeah, and they're for the most part they're being compliant. If the police or the the watch or somebody asks them to they do spread out, and then they'll come back together.
That's how it is.
That's
right?
how it is.
That's how they live their lives. Yeah. Okay. So now with the pandemic, the thrift stores have shut down, of course, but the need is still there. And I understand that you're still doing what needs to be done, and that you're still accepting donations in a temporary warehouse. Is that right?
What happened was we were invited by the city as part of their COVID response group to lead what they call the clothing, hygiene, and supplies pod. And in conversation with the Salvation Army, MCC, the Mission Thrift Store, and the city itself, we realized people are at home cleaning out their closets, accumulating stuff, and there was a concern if we left this till after COVID, there would be this mass onslaught. So what we did is Bible for Missions Foundation gave us the old Mission Thrift Store building to use for free. And what we've done is we've set up a warehouse in there for people to bring all kinds of items that they would normally take to the thrift stores. Clothing, household goods, furniture. The only thing we're not taking is beds. And what we're doing is we're pulling out of it the stuff that we need and the agencies need, and the agencies like the Rapid Rehousing Group, the COPE team, the different teams that are out there can come in and get supplies from the warehouse, okay? We're still operating our pin bank at the Mission, and we feed it out of the warehouse. Then when this is all done, the agencies, My City Care and that group will come back in, take everything that we've really sorted and boxed and everything else, and it'll be done. And they'll be able to kind of take it as they can feed it through their volunteer system.
And where specifically can people take it?
So that is located at 110th Street. It is right across from the Fit place, right?
Okay,
The old
yep,
London
yep.
Drugs.
Yep, Fit for
okay?
Less, yep, right
Fit
there.
for Us,
Yep,
it's right
yep,
there.
yep.
You can't miss it. It's the west door.
Yep.
We're open from 9:30 till noon and 1 to 4:30, Monday to Friday. So bring your stuff down.
Okay, no, that's great. Are there any specific donations that you're in need of?
Well, we're always in need of jeans, hoodies, underwear, okay, and feminine protection in terms of the hygiene, okay? I mean, we don't want to become a place that collects your garbage, but, all your stuff that you would normally take into the thrift stores, bring it on down. Okay. We're collecting it, and it'll get redistributed. That's amazing. That's awesome. It's wonderful. And one of the things about it is, initially we're trying to manage it, but it's really picking up steam. With the success comes a few problems. We've had to reach out to get some garbage containers in collection because some stuff does need to go. Everything is self-distanced. The stuff that comes in today will be held for 2 more days, and then we put it in. So we're following all the practices that we need to follow in terms of the COVID response. Okay, that's fantastic. That's excellent. Now, this kind of leads into my next question. How has COVID-19 changed the way that your outreach team is doing its work? Well, now the outreach team, we've had to up the game because we're trying to fill gaps. One of the teams was the diversion outreach team, which had been asked to do medical transport. So they can no longer touch an individual. The individual has to be able to self get in and out of their vehicle. So for those that kind of get intoxicated and often need help, there's no transport for them to intox. So our outreach team is filling that gap for them. We've had to expand our hours from 9 to 9, Monday to Friday. We're on call 9 to 9 on Saturdays for that. Plus, we're out there as an extra set of eyes, the encampments and those kinds of places. And the outreach team is another one that the city has asked us to lead. So we're working with Watch, the Lethbridge Police Service, the Arches Cope, the DOT team, Quest, and some of those to help them make sure that the street population is staying healthy, and if we see somebody that isn't, try and get them in and get them tested.
Okay, so what does the outreach team normally do then? Because you mentioned sometimes there's physical contact and they can't do that now. So
No,
normally,
our outreach team has always been able to do that.
Okay.
It's the diversion outreach team that couldn't. So we're filling that gap, right?
Okay.
So the other thing that because we've moved to bagged lunches for our evening feeding program,
yeah.
We're also providing, we have a supply of bagged lunches, water, those kinds of things. The team is mobile, going around just checking on people.
So, I mean, obviously that gets back to the basics of what you guys do. You're helping to food, clothe, shelter, and encourage these people on the street and helping them beat addictions as well, because that still needs to be done, right?
That's right.
Okay.
The struggle we're having actually in the addicted population right now is because of the border closure, there's less opioids, which is good on one hand. But the meth use has gone up, and it's actually homemade, self-cooked. So there's bad batches, and so we're really struggling with that population because they're getting quite meth is speed, and so they're very agitated. They're very we're struggling to maintain help for them. Okay, and so that's a bit of a struggle. But the other is, it's become dangerous, and so some of them want to get off the street. And what that's resulted in is because, first of all, detox and treatment were completely shut down, and now they're opened up, but it's a lot of factors in there. Our transitional housing program, we're actually bringing some of them straight in off the street and doing detox and treatment, which we're not totally set up for, but for somebody that wants to get out, we want to get them out.
It sounds like a challenge.
It's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, but there must be some success stories as well, people who are wanting to get off of the addiction or have already. Can you share any success stories?
Yeah, there's lots of success stories. Right now we have 15 men in our recovery program, okay? We have 11 of those 15 men are part of the warehouse. So they've kind of stopped their programming to help us in the warehouse, and they're loving it. They're stepping up to the plate. We're trying to get them in, but we've had a number of guys hit 60 and 90 days in this. Our women's program, we have 2 girls that we actually took in straight off the street, and they're just coming up on 30 days clean. So wow. It's working. They're motivated. And we are seeing that, and we are working with others to try and get the people into the treatment that when we can. But transportation is an issue. Mm-hmm. There's lots of hurdles we're trying to overcome, and it's tough on that population.
Oh, it sounds like it. Are there more people using your food program now, or is it about the same as it was before?
The food program, it is a little different for us right now in that Alpha House out of Calgary was working on the Intox, the 30-bed Intox facility. But when COVID struck, they actually took over the shelter as well, and they're running 2 different sites. We call them Alpha 1 and Alpha 2. The Alpha 2 is in Fritzik. But we've been providing food for them, bagged lunches, for the clientele that's in there, because when they're in the Intox facility, if they leave, they have to stay out for an hour, and then they might lose their place. So this is just a way for us to get evening food into them. We're providing probably 80 bagged lunches a day to them. And then there's another 40 bagged lunches that we have out on the street.
Okay.
So the number of bagged lunches we're feeding is up, okay, or evening meals. But we've had great response in that. The Soup Kitchen's about to start a new evening meal program, and so we'll have to just monitor that because we don't want to duplicate. But it's given us a better opportunity to reach out. We went to bag lunches to help with self-distancing and group gathering.
And you go out and distribute them?
We go out and distribute them, absolutely.
That's amazing. That's a
It
great way to
also
get
allows
into
us
them.
to put eyes on them in an environment that's theirs. The street is theirs, right? So they're much more open to talk with us and do those kinds of things.
That's awesome. Now, how are you doing for volunteers? Are your numbers reducing there? Or?
Well, so volunteers is a bit erratic, and as you can understand, some people want to choose to stay and self-isolate. The seniors, which form a large portion of the volunteers for all of these groups, they need to be kept safe. And so there's a change in that. But then we've had others step up. Yesterday we did an orientation for 10 volunteers that want to come and help at the warehouse where we have a need. Some of our volunteers, they're just steady. We have a couple that for the last 9 years drives in from Hayes every Friday, and they just keep coming. Now, Harvey's in the field, so it's just Kathy, but they're committed. We have some seniors who have made sandwiches for like 10 years, and they just come in and do their thing. So it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah. So let's talk about now with the needs actually increasing because of coronavirus, you've actually set up an emergency response fund, right? So how can viewers get involved in supporting your work with this?
So the first thing anybody can do is pray for us. Pray for the people. Pray for the community. Pray that, God's will would be done. It's the one thing you can do. Pray for our protection and protection of the people. That's the one thing you can do. If you have time and want to volunteer, go online, www.streets alive, and just fill out an application and come in. And the other is if you go to the same website and you want to just donate, click on donate. You can go in and choose the response fund and the emergency response fund, and you can help us out with some cash donation.
That's awesome. So any final thoughts before we leave each other? Our church is answering the call to help you guys in this time of
we're
crisis.
getting a great response from the community. The churches are facing their own challenge, but the Christian community itself, I think, is rising up. But we have to keep our eye on the fact that there's 3 stages to this. So right now we're in stage 1, the crisis itself. It's the pit, okay? But then there's going to be recovery from this crisis, which is how we climb out of the pit. And that's going to have another set of challenges and another set of financial needs and resource needs. And then when we get out of that, there's going to be stage 3, which is the new normal. We are not going back to where it was pre-COVID. There are going to be differences economically, as much as the governments are trying, there are going to be failed businesses. There's going to be a need, and so we believe there's going to be an increased need for our kinds of services, and we need to be in a position to manage them. I'd just like to, I've been reminding people, Acts 17:26, Paul is talking to the Romans about the unknown God, but he talks, and he's using the word nations. But really what he's saying was that God knew that we would be alive at this time, so he created us for such a time as this. And he will equip us to be his light, his salt in this darkness at this time as we work through this virus. So we're looking at Streets Alive, we're looking at this as a wave to ride. We're declaring that we're not going to just survive this, we're going to thrive in the midst of it, and we're going to flourish on the other side of it. We serve the living God, and he created us for this, so we're full speed ahead. We're looking to the future, we want to be prepared, and we're looking for anybody that will join us and be ready to carry us through stage 1, 2, and 3, and when we're out the other side, I mean, the greatest thing that we do right now is we still bring hope to those that have none. We still bring the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ every day. And there's more and more people need to hear that message. And while in the midst of the warehouse and everything else we're doing, everything we do brings that message. So thank you for allowing me to come and share
Well,
today.
Ken, thank you so much for joining us today. It was very enlightening. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Great. Thank you again.
That was Ken Kissick, the co-founder of Streets Alive Mission. Well, the COVID-19 pandemic has drastically changed how our day-to-day lives are lived out, and it's been a frustrating experience for most of us. This change has also put more stress on our family relationships. We want to get some advice from today's guest, Dr. David Curry, president of Doing Family Right, and he is based in Abbotsford, British Columbia. Welcome to Bridge City News, Dr. Curry. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to be back on the program. Always honored to just help out where I can.
That's great. Okay, so the coronavirus has changed the way we live our lives. Being stuck at home can take its toll on relationships, even good relationships. So we all need our space, obviously. So what kinds of marital upsets are you hearing about as a result of being isolated together?
Well, obviously, we do need a measure of alone time because otherwise there's no mystery in our lives. And now with the COVID crisis, we're working at home or maybe lost our job. And so there's all kinds of pressures financially. There's pressures to just worry about the pandemic, and even contracting the disease. And is it going to affect me? There's worry about long-term factors. And there's stresses on even the educational side because now I'm super teacher and all that super, if you're not used to homeschooling, which most aren't. There's a lot of pressures on the home and the family at this time.
Yeah, no kidding. What advice do you have for couples to avoid these kinds of clashes, kind of about like money and spending too much time together, instead to actually use this time to improve their relationships?
Yeah. You asked the question, Jeanette, because I recently wrote an article exactly on this and the difference between social distancing, which we need to do, and social exclusiveness, which I am actually able to be with my spouse and family at this time where I'm, as it were, quarantined. And so it's how you look at it. It can be a great enriching time. It also can reveal a lot of fractures in the relationship that are already there because the extra stress is going to do that. So just operating with a greater level of patience, recognize that extra stress is there for all of us. And so, a little more grace, a little more patience. Sometimes we have to do timeouts, maybe chill, do our version of workout stresses and things. But there's just some realizations that things are different, and we have to think a longer perspective. It's not just hang in there for another 2 or 3 weeks and we should be good. This could be another few months or longer, and so we got to start getting into some routines that are going to be functional.
Yeah, exactly. Now, of course, the kids aren't able to attend school, so mom and dad are stuck doing some kind of home education. Any tips on how to do this successfully?
Most of us have a measure of tolerance for our kids, but are quite happy that they head off to school around 8:30 and come home around 3. Give us time to do our thing, their learning and those kind of things. But now to take on this whole dimension of teacher, educator, basically preoccupier of 5 extra hours of their day, that's a whole new thing. And most of us maybe don't have an educational background of how to do this right. We likely have the capacity to understand and teach them what most of them need to know, but haven't thought the routines through, haven't thought through how to do this. And of course, a lot of the teaching is online, so they have to connect with teachers and peers, and then they have assignments, and we got to supervise them more and be more present. It's very complicated, and what I would suggest for parents on this one is just embrace this new role early as you can and get past this is frustrating because this could be for a while. And so whether you're going to, pitch hit for each other, husband one day, wife another day, whether it's, because sometimes working at home, the husband might be home working too. She may be off work. Who knows? They might have both lost job and are frustrated with that too. But there needs to be a commitment to helping the kids because it's new to them too, right? I mean, I was talking to my grandkids, and they were talking about how they don't like it as much because they don't get to see their friends. Because, so much of mom and dad is not even their favorite thing either, because their friends are fun and they get recess and all these things. And so, it's a change for the kids. So we're going to have to all kind of fall forward together.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting you kind of mentioned sticking in a routine. Is it important to have the routine, like maybe this is school time, this is chore time, time for physical activity, anything like that? Would you suggest anything like that?
Yeah, 100%. Matter of fact, not even with the COVID-19 pandemic on us, it's wiser for any family to establish a routine so that the expectations don't have to be recommunicated every day. Because if you don't have a routine, it's kind of like, well, what's next? Well, I want to go play video games. I want to go play video games, right? And you just keep coming back. Or I'm hungry. Well, we're going to have breakfast first. Then we're going to do some schoolwork. Then we're going to have a break, kind of like recess. Then we're going to have a snack. And then, to plan out the day and to have that consistent so that every day you don't have to kind of readjust the schedule. Here's the expectations, and you're not fighting so much because they get in their head. Here's what the routine is, and this is how we're going to do it. Now, as they get older, you can flex the routine a little more as they get into their teens and beyond. They have a little more independence, but especially when they're young, the routine is the way to go.
Yeah. Now, you'd mentioned fighting. So, with families having to stay at home in close quarters, siblings obviously start to get on each other's nerves, right? So, once a fight happens, are there do's and don'ts as to how a parent should respond to an argument?
Well, no different than the fights that happen every day before the pandemic happened. They've always been there. And, strong-willed kids, different personalities, these are all in play. And what happens is through a crisis period, through an extra stress period, the rate of the fights could increase. The intensity of the fights could increase. And even the parents' resiliency to handle the fights could be less. And so, there needs to be a game plan there. One of the things that I like doing is if you've given them some time to work on things, you come back and they're fighting, and you didn't know really who caused what and what happened, the best thing to do is say, okay, listen, you got 2 minutes to go in that room and come out of there having solved this, or else you're both going to have a 10-minute timeout. Yeah, but I didn't do it. He did. Okay, I don't care. I wasn't here. So let's don't. So you actually put him in a room for 2 to 3 minutes. You try to solve it, talk it out, because if you don't, you're both going to get fun. Well, that's not fair. I said, okay, well, I wasn't here. You go talk it out. So you hear them behind the closed doors going, well, you shouldn't have said that. Well, you're stupid. Well, yeah, but I don't want to wait 10 minutes. And you hear them talking behind the door, and they come out and we're okay now. Well, because you're gonna unilaterally just punish everybody. And of course, that's not fair if you know that one's always picking on another one. But you got to find creative ways to push beyond, and obviously find their currency. What is the thing that really motivates them? If the currency is a snack still, if the currency is a playtime with a certain toy, if it's social media, if it's some kind of electronic game, find out what their currency is, and that's the one that you use to control their behavior.
Wow, yeah. It sounds like almost forcing them into conflict resolution and communication. So those are good life skills, actually. And this, of course, is a hard one, but what steps can parents take to prevent the kids from starting fights?
Well, I mean, if you got your game plan together and know where we're going, and you can kind of anticipate the trouble spots. When I drive from here to my office, from my home office to my work office, I know the potholes in the road. I know I got to steer a little bit right here, a little bit left there. And parents are wise enough to know the potholes, where the tensions are going to be. This one's going to fight over food. They didn't get enough. So be careful on that one there. This one isn't good at being alone. So you got to supervise them a little more. So the wiser the parent, the more they know the trouble points, where the potholes in the road in the family, to kind of steer them away. And you can start to realize, okay, this was too long of this. We got to stop and come back to this, or we need some activity time to get some of the energy out. You got to just read the situation and react accordingly as a parent.
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head right there. How important is it for the kids to get some physical activity during this time?
Well, if you raise kids, and we had 4 and now 13 grandkids, you got to understand that they go stir crazy. They got all this energy inside, and having them kind of really get a little bit tired, a little bit exercise out and all that allows them to settle down for a period. They're not as antsy. They can settle in on a task, and so it's really important to vary the educational time with I know you can only play in your backyard or in the park near whatever with your kids, but some kind of tag, or we got croquet in the backyard, or other different games where they can play, or we go for a family walk or a hike or whatever, just to let that energy be spent. And because most kids like recess at school, they're going to like those breaks as well. And so, but the activity, some kind of physical exertion is a good thing.
Yeah, that's great, especially now that the weather's getting nicer. And then, of course, kids, they love to spend hours on the screen. So what's your advice on how to set proper boundaries around this?
Yeah, well, of course, that's a complicated one before the virus, right? Because, kids are becoming really screen dominant. If I use the word FaceTime, meaning you and me seeing face to face, not like on a screen, though Apple has used that. I like to have kids balance FaceTime, real face-to-face time, with screen time. To just say, look, if you've had 2 hours of playing with real people, you can have some time now with screen time, right? And try to find a balance between FaceTime, real people time, and screen time, and then also keep an idea that the screen time is part of the reward system. For most of them, that's the gratitude. They want to do that, and so that's part of the currency. So really important to keep in mind that I can use that as collateral in my corner to get the behavior that I want. So healthy boundaries, depending on the age of the kid, and be careful when they're really young. They do it too much, the addictive behavior kicks in, and then it more becomes an impulse control problem, and that's hard to correct later. So be careful.
Yeah, and this isolation time, it also gives us an opportunity to spend more quality time together as a family, which is a good thing. So and that could include, regular time reading scripture together, or praying together, or even discussing some of the many questions that kids might have about life. So what's your advice for parents who are afraid to maybe tackle those big issues and the spiritual family times together?
You're so right, Jeanette, when we're talking about there's more opportunity for family time. I call it social exclusiveness, that we are forced now to be our little unit, our family. And of course, right down to individually, I have no excuse now, well, I don't have time to read my Bible. You have a little more time to read your Bible now. Okay, so you shouldn't be able to use that as an excuse. Also, to carve out time for a couple, especially if your kids are older and they can watch themselves, for couples to go on a walk, or just to go pick up with their favorite drink and just chat in the park, husband and wife together. A little more couple time would be really wise. And then even as a family, to do things together as a family. More families are doing more games and puzzles and watching things together than they ever have before. So that's all good. Spiritually is an interesting thing. Rather than, my opinion, would be, rather than trying to carve out more God time, interact about spiritual things as part of life. Rather than, well, we're going to have family devotions now. Well, okay, you can have some devoted time to share something and to pray together. That's good. We pray together every night with our kids. And even on the weekend, we had some grandkids over. We prayed with them every evening. But spiritually, it's really important to live your faith, first of all. Your kids are going to get it from you because they have been watching it. But then secondly, talk about the Lord and the difference Christ makes, even how it relates to the crisis. Talk about that as everyday life conversation, not just in this set time. Have the set times, but be bigger than that. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Of course, this whole situation is having an impact also on divorced parents who are sharing custody of kids. So what we're hearing is that in some cases, one parent maybe believes that the other isn't following proper health precautions, so they feel justified in not allowing visitation or not sharing custody as required by the courts. So what's the proper way to maybe handle a situation like that?
Well, that's a good question. It's a fair question. But for those in that situation, obviously the greater amicability between a divorced, ex, partners, the better it's going to be for the kids. So before COVID came along, there has to be a willingness to work together, that custody is shared, and we respect one another. And so the greater there is that flow happening, the more likely during this time we'll be able to get through these things. I did have a couple just last week where there was a stress over this very thing. And it had to do with, the husband wasn't limiting his sphere of connections as much as the wife thought she needed, or she wanted in the family, and so she and he were at odds about, I'm okay with this, no, that's not good, because they have a child with surgery pending, and she didn't want that person, the child, to be sick before the surgery, and so rather than commanding and putting rules down in this situation, no, they weren't divorced, but it was stress over the very same COVID stuff. I just said, look, just appeal on their desire for what's best for the kid, and trust them to make a wise decision, because the kid needs both parents. I mean, no matter, unless it's really abusive or toxic, but the kid needs both parents. And so we need to do our best to be amicable in these situations.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a lot of really, really good advice, especially for this very stressful situation that we're all kind of dealing with right now. Any final thoughts on how to keep our homes a peaceful, safe place during this pandemic?
You got to take responsibility for you. You have to say, okay, I need to be my best me at this time. I need to put a game face on. When I say game face, I don't mean harsh. I mean, it could be pleasant. It could be positive. It could be encouraging. It could be Christ-centered. But you need to be your best you. So whatever it takes to keep you healthy so you can be the best husband, the best wife, the best parent, the best friend, that's what's important. It starts with you, and you taking responsibility before the Lord for how you interact with your spouse and your kids. That changes everything if you take responsibility for you. And don't blame others for your issues. Deal with it, be the best you, and trust God to work in your life so that your family can be as positive as can be during this challenging time.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Curry.
Awesome. Awesome to be there anytime.
All right, that was Dr. David Curry, president of Doing Family Right. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.